Sally from the Polka Dot Life. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to make a really sweet fall card, and you can use it for any number of occasions simply by switching out the sentiments. Join me over at the craft desk and let's get started. Okay, to get things started, we are going to be using the Harvest Hello stamp set, and it has been used a lot today and not necessarily cleaned up well because I've been using it a lot. We are going to be using the Memento Black ink, and we are going to use our very vanilla thick cardstock. Trust me when I tell you, you want to always use the thick when you are going to be working with your Stampin' Blends. Even though the rest of our card, we're going to be using the Early Espresso ink, we want to use the black Memento. You can use the other, but I just think that it does much better, less chance of things blurring if you use the Memento Black. And so we are simply just going to put this aside to dry while we work on another few things. Let's take our inside layer, and I am going to pull out this little stamp. The Harvest Hello stamp set is super cute, but I wanted something a little bit smaller in a pumpkin, and it just has the one size. So I pulled out this image from our paper pumpkin kit from this month, and that is also a good reminder to you to sign up on or before October 9th to get the newest subscription kit that will come out. It'll get processed through on the 10th. So if you want to do, I think it's called Joy of the Season, and it is going to be Christmas cards. So if that is something you would like to try, it's a great time to dip your toe in the water. But I love having those stamps, even after my supplies are gone, to be able to use them for different things. I just have this really beat up looking scrap, and let's do our stem. Let's see, and it goes this way on our stamp. And it doesn't matter that I've kind of splidged up the bottom because we're going to cover that up. And then I want to do this leaf here. And again, if that made a little imprint, it doesn't matter because we're going to punch it out. I will have just a little bit more stamping to do on our sentiment layer, but I'm waiting until we get a little further in the process to do that so I know exactly where I want to place it. This is our Apple Punch Builder Punch, and as you can see, it really looks like an apple here on this, and you can tell. But when you flip it over, that is where the magic happens. I will tell you, I could go ahead and have made a shim, but I'm only doing this one card, so I didn't want to do that. And so we're going to just waste off a little bit of cardstock because this is going to cut out more than what I need. Okay, so we will have our leaf. Let's just trim this down. It's like I say, it's just depending on what you're going to do. If you're going to be doing a lot of the same card, then you would want to go ahead and get this set up properly. But since we're just doing one, we're good. But it makes a really quick work of getting a little shape up. They're really small, but you can see those are our little pieces. We have our standard card base in Mint Macron, and we are just going to simply fold it and push up toward that score line so that our edges are nice together while we hold this bottom, and we'll give it a little crease. Let's start and layer up our card. Let's start with this strip, and this paper is from the Gilded Autumn Designer Series paper. And that's a good time to remind you as well that that Designer Series paper sale is still running until the end of October. And this is just such a pretty paper, and it doesn't matter whether you use the foiled side or the sides that aren't shiny and blingy that we are going to be using today. And you know, that's okay if this doesn't exactly line up there. I can trim it, or we can actually just kind of scoot it down to where it's just kind of centered in there, because it's going to be going across that early espresso layer. Sometimes just, you know, when you're measuring, sometimes things just get a little tiny. And when you're working with 8ths or 16ths, that happens. And although it wasn't today, so I'm not sure what was going on there. All right. I used our Dainty Diamonds embossing folder on this layer of regular Very Vanilla. We don't need our thick. That would make it really hard to emboss. So I have this layer, and we're going to put it right on top of this layer of Early Espresso. And again, I'm using liquid multi-purpose glue or Tombow, whichever you call it. And you want to make sure you can still kind of hear that sound when you're taking it across your cardstock. That way you kind of know you're not going to be using too much glue. But we'll just give that a nice little press. Then we will just take this strip and we will put it on the left-hand side of our card. And you know, I like this Dainty Diamonds because it has a pattern in it, and it makes it really nice to keep things straight. These little lines that repeat here, it's just a nice little added feature. All right. I'm just going to put this layer off to the side for right now. Let's bring in our pumpkin that we stamped in the Memento Tuxedo Black ink. We are going to be using our Stampin' Blends markers. These are alcohol markers. They are not like your markers, your Crayola marker kind of things. These are alcohol based, and they're great for blending because they end up with a really nice finish. That, like, if you just took a really thin line marker and colored something in, you would see lots of squiggle marks. And these are really nice because you don't. I like to start with my light, but it doesn't matter. You can do it with either one. And you know, I am going to actually bring in our catalog to stick underneath me, because these will bleed through. Even though it is on thick cardstock, it will bleed through. And I find it very soothing. So you can take it across like this, and it really doesn't matter as far as leaving marks. And that probably won't show either, because we're going to cut this out. But I kind of like to take mine up and down, especially on a image like this. And it's really not complicated at all. Our artists at Stampin' Up already give us some clues on what to do for shading and so on. You could just simply shade on those little shade marks, and I find it's easier to move my paper when I'm doing something like this than to try to get my hand bent in all different kind of positions. And you can build layers of color, and you can just do so many things with this. So, but you do want to keep your lids on these when you aren't using them, because they will dry out very, very quickly, and we don't want to do that. You want to let your cardstock have a chance to absorb that ink and that alcohol to dissipate some before you move on to your next layer. It might not have to be completely dry, but you're going to be much happier and much less frustrated if you let things dry out first. I am going to come in with my dark mint macaron, and I like to pick a side of my black line, and that is the side that I am going to say is getting the shade. And so I am just going to keep coming on to the right of this. And our artists give us little clues for those little places of where we might want to do some shading. There really isn't a wrong or a right. A true artist knows the difference of where is the proper place to shade. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But using these markers, it's really just brings a depth of color if you do a little shading, even if maybe technically to a trained artist it wouldn't be in the right place. And then let's let that set for a minute, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to bring my light back in, and I am just going to kind of let it activate that alcohol again on that dark. Now, I've heard some people teach it that you push that shading, that dark, back onto itself with the light to blend it. And other ones I've heard teach that you drag it out. So I think that that just is your preference, and see how you like the effect of what you get. I kind of like to drag mine out, but that also kind of also is per image. If it's something that I think that it needs to be wider, I'll pull it out. If it's something that I think needs to be smaller, then I will push it back onto itself. And you just want to take and be careful not to use the nib, the very point of your nib of your marker. You don't want to damage them. And I would speed this up, except it's just a process. It's not a lengthy process, but it is just a process nonetheless. I am going to maybe just do this to where we let just a little tiny lighter spot there. I'll see what that looks like when it dries. If I don't like it, I can always go back and just color over it. But it just is a little highlight. You don't need to do that by any means. But I kind of think that I'll like that. Just trying to soften that line. And you can even use different colors, especially if they're in the same color family. You can use different colors all together and layer them on top of each other and play with it. Just see what colors you can come up with that you like, that work well together. So we are just going to let that dry, and we will be back. Okay, let's bring in our punch. You want to be mindful when you stamp your image that you stamp it in the right direction so you can get in here easily to cut out your image. And we're just kind of lining up that point, and if you press it just a little bit, it's going to hold it in place if you need to turn it and look at it at a different angle. Let's work on our sentiment layers. These are cut out using the layering squares dies. And if you are just starting out and building your collection, I think that those layering, all those shapes, the ovals, circles, you know, all those shapes that we have, those are a great place to start because those are going to be timeless pieces that you will always be able to use in your card making as you start adding dies to your collection. So we've just layered that up. I am going to bring in this Early Espresso ink pad. And we're going to bring in our leaf stamp. And I just kind of want to do it right here in this corner. And then I'm changing up the sentiment for this one because I seem to use my Hey There pumpkin on a lot of these. So this one we're going to change it to Give Thanks. And I have to pull this down here to be able to see it and not put my head in the camera. There you go. So you do get to do some stamping, you get to do some coloring, you get to do some embossing, a lot of fun techniques on this card. So we have our pumpkin and we have our little pieces here. I am going to go ahead and I just on this part of the pumpkin am going to lay down some glue. And we are just going to put this where we like it as far as up toward our sentiment and our little leaf. And just hold that in place for a minute. We're going to bring in just the tiniest bit of glue here on our bottom. I guess for the apple it goes this way, the pumpkin it goes this way, of our stem. And I'm going to do a little bit of glue, just a tad on both sides, just because it's going to be sticking on both layers. And I just kind of liked it kind of curving over that seam just a little bit. And then we're going to take our leaf and it's just going to get glue on the back side, just a little dab. And we are going to take it, and you can arrange it however, if you want it going off to the side, more up in the air, whatever you think looks nice. And that's just a pretty, I like everything in home decor now, you know, farmhousey kind of has this color as real popular with the cream with the pumpkins. And I love that look. Let's slide this off to the side and let's bring in our card base. And let's put some glue on the back of our Early Espresso layer. I like to work with my littlest things first and then kind of work my way up to gluing the larger ones, just because I guess if there's leaves you a little bit more room for a mistake without wasting materials. So we're just going to give it a little press down. Don't be afraid to use different components, stamp sets or dies or embossing folders from different collections. I think this is from the Peony Gardens set, but I'm not 100% on that one. And I just think this Gilded Autumn is so beautiful. I have been busy working in my craft room, and it's kind of a disaster at the moment. I could not put my hands on my regular dimensionals, so we are going to use our mini ones, but that's okay because we don't really need to use that many anyway. Use my Take Your Pick tool, and we'll just need to put them a few more places. Put 2 over here on the edge of our pumpkin, and I just want to see, because we don't want to put them right in this area, because this is already a thicker layer and we don't want it to get all wobbly. So we want some over here because this is going to hold this up off that layer a little bit. And we don't want to get it smushed in the mail either. So that's why I'm putting a few more, since these are minis. I really can't tell you what I did with my other ones, but I have had such a fun day. I've been phoning with a friend who also likes to make cards. It's really nice to craft with a buddy. I don't know about you, but my friend and I are sorely missing getting together to do some crafting. All right, and just to give us a little movement, we are going to just put a little, enough to take the sticky from the dimensionals off, but not flood these by any means. And we are just, and you can put this low, you can put it high, you can put it wherever you would like. I just kind of did mine sort of towards the center, but maybe more towards the lower portion. But again, I like using this to line up against here because I want to make sure that that square is straight and not worry so much about the pumpkin. Pumpkins are definitely always wonky and different shapes, and at least mine never did seem to ever sit up straight, or for my children when I was trying to get them carved, and they would never quite go the right way. But I love fall. Some of my happiest memories with my children were just different fall activities. I love that. Let's bring in our layer for the inside, just because it's, you know, that's a light color. It would work to write on, but I just think it makes it, gives it a little more sophisticated look whenever you put a Whisper White or Very Vanilla layer inside. I like either version of the card. It's just the sentiment that has changed. I like them both. Then I had this one. I used this same Dainty Diamonds embossing folder here, the same color scheme. I used this gorgeous, soft, Very Vanilla ribbon, and it's part of the Forever Greenery set. I just made some banners, and then I had an extra piece of the Early Espresso, so I just put that on the top just to do something different. I love this one too. I think that this particular pattern in the Designer Series paper gets overlooked a little bit, but it is just a pretty one to get some texture and just adds a different dimension to your card. I embossed this with the Tasteful, it's either Tasteful Texture or Tasteful Textiles. I always get that wrong. Our names are so similar, but it is just a really nice, it's another one of those things that are a good investment for your craft room as you add your embossing folders, because it's something that you're going to always be able to use. And I like this dark espresso, this Early Espresso Houndstooth. Again, we did the same thing with the pumpkin. I added some linen thread, and This one, I cut this card base just a little bit differently. It just opens different, and I actually colored that inside layer as well. Then I decided, okay, let's switch to a different paper. So I went to the plaid tidings paper, and I thought, well, isn't that just cute to stamp that pumpkin right on that plaid paper and punch it out? I just think it's such a fun country feel. And then I just made this super loopy ribbon with the linen thread. I took my long handled makeup brushes and I just did some sponging around here with crumb cake. This layer is crumb cake as well, and this is the tin tile embossing folder, and I popped this up with dimensionals. And this is our crushed curry cardstock, and I use Whisper White because that is the coordinating color for that paper. And I just stamped one of those little paper pumpkins on the inside. Then this one I got a little bit busier. So I stuck with the plaid tidings paper, but I did a little paper piecing. I stamped on each one of these 3 different patterns. I stamped out a pumpkin, and then I fussy cut those. And that just means you take your little paper snips and you cut all around that. Then I took a layer of Whisper White cardstock and I stamped one on it and cut it out with a punch. And then I just randomly changed the patterns and put them all back into this pumpkin. And then, I don't know if you can tell it on camera or not, but I took it and ran this pumpkin through the Subtles embossing folder, and it just gives it a nice texture. It makes it look like fabric, and I just loved it. And I took the 2 leaf stamps and I just made my own designer series paper on the background and used our Cajun cardstock for the base, and this is pumpkin pie. I popped it up, I flagged this little greeting, and these are the Holiday Basic Grindstone Jewels in Pumpkin Pie, I believe that is the color for those. And then I used just that little stamp on the inside again. And for my envelopes, this time I just simply stamped that pumpkin down in the corner. Thank you for taking time to visit with me today. It's always better to craft with a friend. As always, remember to be kind, send a card, and do something creative. Bye-bye.